What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the special edition of Auto Black. For those who don't know, Auto Black is a discussion based podcast where we get on this virtual stoop and we talk about whatever we want from architecture to culture to politics. And we do it through an unapologetically Black perspective. And today we have a special recording, if you will. We're getting on here on this Friday night, and it's smaller group than usual, but we're on here to talk about our recent experience that we've all attended at the National Association of Minority Architects NOMA Conference. And of course,
Want to
as
say it again?
always, when I get on here, I'm always on here with my friends. So we have Jamar,
Where do, baby?
we have Whitney. And so, like I said, we've all just recently attended the 2025 NOMA conference in Kansas City. So we thought it'd be a great idea for us to just get on here, rap about our experiences, talk about some of the seminars that we went to, some of the awesome people that we were able to meet, and just really debrief and just talk about that and turn it into a podcast episode. So before we dive into the specifics of it, I just want to ask you all, how was Kansas City for? I'm assuming that's all your first time going to Kansas City. So what'd you think of like the city itself?
Well, first of all, before we talk about the city, we need to talk about how you butchered the organization that we supposed to be repping, which is National Organization of Minority Architects, not the National Association. It's cool
Not
though. We said
NAMA.
NAMA. We went to the NAMA conference.
See, I started thinking about like NBA and my bad. That's on me. That's on me.
But for me, Kansas City, namaste, namaste. I
Hey,
appreciate it.
fix that in post.
But no, but for me though, Kansas City was interesting because it grew on me the longer I stayed there. Will I go back? No, it's not a place for me. But it was growing on me because I don't know, like being from the East Coast, and I've lived on the East Coast my whole life. It just seemed like it was a slower pace, right? There wasn't like the hustle and bustle of the places like Baltimore, DC, New York, Boston. It was slow paced. Like I didn't see too much traffic. It's a great place to raise kids. I'll give you that. It seems like it's a great place. They love Kansas City football. They love Taylor Swift. I'm good.
How about you, Whitney? What'd you think of the city?
I wasn't there long enough because I left Saturday morning. So I feel like I
Mhm.
also didn't have a lot of time to explore the city either. From like an initial reaction, it definitely reminded me a lot of Minneapolis. I think because of the industrial portion of it, like Courtney was mentioning. But I feel like I didn't have enough of an experience to kind of have an opinion on it.
I mean, you still go like initial reactions though, like because for me, honestly, I think the drive into the city was really gorgeous, right? Like coming from the airport, you kind of got these little glimpses of the city. The airport was also really nice because they actually just recently redid the airport. It used to be like an older
Beautiful.
concrete structure, and it was like honestly one of the more beautiful airports I've been to.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought the city was interesting. Someone in my group had kind of said it succinctly: is it's a cool city. Probably won't come back, but it's a cool city. Um, and then I've never been to a Midwest city. I've been to Chicago, but I don't really count that as like the Midwest because it still has a very uh, northeastern city type of feel to it in terms of like density and scale. But I was actually surprised at the amount of Black history that was contained within the city.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they had the Negro League Museum, which was a really fascinating museum to go on. But just in terms of like the different areas that were historically Black and still had some of that remnant of historically Black elements to it. And a couple of tours that I went on, you were able to actually meet a lot of like boots on the ground people who are doing some really impactful things to try to restore and preserve some of the history and some of the neighborhoods there. So, I don't necessarily think of like Kansas City, Missouri as being a city that had a lot of the great migration of, of Black families from the South. But that was a very surprising and interesting thing to see, is just that the amount of depth of Black history, which we're everywhere in this country, so I shouldn't be surprised. But that to me was pretty interesting. So overall, though, this was my first time being at a conference since 2012. So, and back then I was a student. So going
Yeah,
to
each
this
of yourself.
conference. Yeah, yeah. So going to this conference now, 10 plus years later, with 10 plus years of working experience, it was like I was seeing everything that was new for the first time. So for some of y'all who have been to some of the conferences a little bit more recently, how did this compare to some of the more recent conferences?
Best local chapter reception so far. It was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Baltimore's was great. I don't want to like downplay that one because it was great. The band was an awesome touch, but the Science City Museum, especially I think like now with everything that's going on, I think we all needed the opportunity to play as adults
Mhm.
and just kind of like let loose. And so I think it was a great opportunity for that.
Until you get hurt, right? Because like
Yeah.
a play with alcoholic drinks, you're bound to have some boo boo.
See, I didn't even drink anything. I was literally just excited off of vibes. And I feel like a lot of people didn't drink. Like, we were just excited to play.
Yeah, because drinks were $20 a pop.
Can't,
Yeah, I will say going off of that though, I think the yeah,
not
13, 7,
10.
Or
6,
six.
5,
Yeah.
free. For my pain to come into Kansas City. Yeah.
Quick aside, at that local chapter party, I wanted to stay longer, but I had been walking all day and I walked all over that museum and my hip was on fire. Like I have really tight hip flexors, and so my hip was on fire. And so I said, I have to sneak out of here because I need some ibuprofen and I need to lay down. And as I'm making my way out, guess who I see at the exit? I see Whitney standing there. And so I was like, all right, Rob, get it together. Act like you ain't got no limp and just walk past. I did not. I felt 30 plus at that moment.
I would have clowned you. I thought you were going to sleep because, you're like, I'm away from the kid and the wife. Like, I get to just chill. I was like, okay, I guess that's a good excuse. You're
My
just
Look,
old.
hip
You need
was
to
about to,
stretch.
it was about to melt from the bone. It
Oh
was
my
terrible.
gosh, you need to stretch.
look. Raw walked by you, Whitney, the way Mulan's father went to get the little war document. He tried to walk with pride.
Wow, that's so specific.
Look, Mulan was one of my favorite movies. All right.
Rob's just old.
And I
Yeah.
made the mistake of wearing my hard bottom.
He's just old and stiff.
Look, go ahead and get your Dr. Scholl's. We know your alignment. What you need, with Mr.
Sounds like he
Goodfeet or
needs some
whatever, the
Birkenstocks.
good doctor.
Listen, man, that I didn't do my stretches, and yeah, I am old, but it's all good. So I guess to start to dive into some of the conference a little bit more, what was, I guess, one of the most sort of like impactful moments that you had, whether it was a specific seminar, whether it was getting to talk with some students or anything that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah. For me, it was honestly the conference always feels like a family reunion. You see people that you haven't seen in a year. You see people that you haven't seen in 5 years, 10 years. I mean, for you, example, right? Some people probably haven't seen you in 10 years, and like for example, like you saw one of our good friends from UVA, and it's been a while since you had seen him.
Hmm.
So it's just like a family reunion, a big gathering. For me, that's always impactful because it reminds me that I belong in the place. And obviously, I moved from Boston to Baltimore, so I'll be always seeing the Boston NOMA group, and they always accept me for like I'm family, like I'm still a part of their chapter, even though I've changed flags and everything. And it's just always nice to catch up with people. So for me, that's always the most impactful. Obviously, the speakers, there's a lot of good speakers that happen, but for me, it's just the community that's always being built.
Yeah, I would have to echo that. I think the amount of support that you get at the conference is unmatched, which I guess it is kind of like you're bringing all of these communities that are supportive of each other into one spot, and then you're seeing like people that you haven't seen in a while, like Jamar was saying, and they're just as supportive of you. Like if you just met them for the first time, or if you've known them for 10 years, and they verbalize it. I feel like we don't get a lot of that in the spaces we're in every day. So to hear that verbalized and celebrated is an amazing feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had thought that the my initial reaction was like felt like the diaspora of the conference had expanded, and I don't know, it obviously is still largely black architects, but it felt like I had seen more non-black architects, definitely a lot more non-black architect students that I had remember seeing. Um, and I'm sure that was part of NOMA's strategic plan to start to pivot that way, or maybe that's just sort of a natural occurrence that has happened as people are looking for community in a way, and NOMA has always been about embracing and developing that community. So it was good to see that the range of individuals that NOMA is capturing has expanded, and I'm hoping that at some point that manifests itself in the profession in some type of way.
Yeah, I would say the students. I would say that that demographic has probably shifted one because a lot of the students are sent there because they're part of the student competition, and a lot of them have turned that hopefully into a semester project. So you don't necessarily have to be a part of your student chapter in order to participate in that. So that's similar to like one of our student chapters. So that group was very diverse because it was a class rather than just
Right.
their student chapter leaders who are there. But then a lot of student chapters work in tangent with their AIAS chapters, so you kind of get that cross collaboration a lot, and people
Interesting.
being a part of one or both of those groups and then also participating. But I would say like the business meeting, they shared the demographics for professionals, and it's still predominantly black, but there's a huge chunk of people that are Latinx and other demographics as well.
Yeah, actually, so I don't know if any of you guys have tried to participate in one of the NOMA conference student competitions. While Rob and I were at UVA, we actually tried to do the Detroit one. We failed miserably, and it was kind of it was just a little bit internal drama, but it was interesting because I think we were trying to push to get a class, like to get it to be a studio, because one, we felt like other colleges were doing this. Like I said, this was like 10, 13 years ago now. Jesus. But yeah, so we were trying to kind of get that integrated. I don't know if UVA has done that, obviously, because they weren't, I don't even think they were a part of the competition this year. But it's interesting to see that now, like you said, that these are now student like semester projects. Like you're getting graded off of this, so you're putting more sweat equity into it because
Yeah, it's very competitive now. But also, I feel like the reason for some chapters not participating is they're losing support from their schools as well. So I think we're going to kind of see a lot of that. Like the students you're going to see represented are the ones from schools that are still supporting them, and the ones you're going to see a lot less of don't. And I think that's also going to give other schools the opportunity to win because I feel like there's been like the heavy hitters for a while, and some of them, like, I didn't see Clemson there this year. There may have been some students there, but I didn't see anyone there. And they've been there, a couple of times that I've noticed. So
yeah, I'm hoping, like I said, that translates to again kind of growing the diversity within NOMA. Just because again, like you're seeing diversity in the students, and we know diversity is in the schools, but it's like when it's time to get licensed, that's when that drop off really happens. And hopefully, by coming to these conferences, they're seeing that you can make it, that you can see yourself in somebody that's a little bit older than you. Take them some of that advice because it is a tough road to become an architect. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had actually talked to a couple of young gentlemen from I forget what schools they were from, but they were in their third year, fourth year, and what was interesting about that is that, and I believe I had this conversation with you, Jamar, about how I still feel like I'm still very novice and new in my career. I have 10 plus years of experience, and I've hopped around on different sides of the table, if you will. But I still feel like I'm very novice, and so talking to these young guys, and they were asking, or at least the guy I was talking to was asking a lot of questions about actually trying to gain tangible advice on where to go, and what kind of grad school should he look for, and like how is it in the industry, and how is the licensing process, and what are some things I can do now to help better prepare me. And it was very interesting to be on now this side of the conversation, and actually having advice to be able to offer up, but also again, that's one of the beautiful things about the conference is that it always included students too. So you're able to get some of that face to face interaction with professionals, and I was actually talking to a lot of young architects and professionals, and I was obviously with my work experience, I was lobbying for a lot of they were suggesting that a lot of them should look into once you get in your license, how do you actually begin to diversify yourself as an architect? And obviously, I believe a lot of architects should go into the development realm, and so it was interesting to have some of those.
How are you going to say? How are you going to go to an architecture conference and say, "Hey, you should lead the profession"?
So
He
I
said
had
after licensure.
correct,
He
and
was like,
so
"Get your license, then lead the profession."
well,
Got it.
somebody had actually asked me, why did I leave sort of architecture in the traditional sense. And, obviously there's a lot of reasons as to why I made that decision. But I told him one of the things that I actually found out is that I became a better architect once I went and worked as a developer, but through the lens of an architect. I learned actually how to be a better architect, especially on the construction side, because as an architect, if you're not heavily involved in the CA, your time at the site is all about billable hours. So you spend so much time in the construction drawings looking at construction related items from a two-dimensional perspective, but on the development side you can be at the site as much as you need to. So when there's an issue that comes up, an RFI that comes up, the contractor goes to you, the owner's rep, first before they goes to the architect. So it's interesting to be able to that I was able to learn a lot more about construction and how a building is put together. So I think again, I still think that architects should look to diversify their roles because I think it's beneficial for the greater good, but also as the architect, you become I think a stronger architect.
One thing I'll say about the kids too, or the students. Sorry, they're not kids; they're adults, and it's interesting how like a lot of them were asking great questions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like I know when I went my first year, I was just stuck with my UVA crew, and that's all we talked to. I mean, I think I talked to Brian Hudson for a little bit because we were seated at a table with him. But besides that, I don't think I talked to a single professional unless it was like to get something free from the expo. That's all. And even to this day, I still go to the expo just for the freebies. HDR, y'all be killing it. I might have to apply. I'm joking. I'm happily taken. But but like I that's the only reason why I would go to the expo. But the amount of questions that they were asking, like Rob was saying, was just amazing. But again, like the networking that they're doing, maybe it's because they have a better understanding of how to like get through the profession. Whereas when I was coming up, I literally still was trying to understand what the profession was about, and so I didn't know what the questions were. But with social media, with just the internet and being able to be more exposed to what architects do and see that, like Art Daily is a good example of that, and just they were able to make connections a lot faster, and they were less timid than I was. And honestly, I'm still timid. So maybe it's just their personality, but again, they were killing it out there.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that. So switching gears, I Noma had some very interesting guests for keynote presentations, and again, I haven't been since 2012, so I don't know how they've been trying to change that. But it was interesting that there was essentially non-architects that was giving keynote presentations, and for our listeners, we had two keynote presentations. One was by Michael Brown's family, obviously being in Kansas City, in Missouri, in proximity to that tragedy. It was interesting to hear just obviously how they process, but also sort of like what they're doing in terms of trying to commemorate their son. But then we also had another speaker, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, and I don't know about y'all, but I thought she was phenomenal. I had first heard about her from Trevor Noah podcast, but I just thought her presentation on just sort of like AI and imagination and just how that has sort of how systems have taken imagination away from us or from children and just sort of thinking about how with the onset of technology and artificial intelligence, just kind of the outlook on that. But what was y'all's perspective on our keynotes?
I
Yeah,
think
so
she was fantastic too. And I got the book after, unlike some of you. So
I say, "Hey,
I
who
haven't
didn't
gotten
get the
halfway
book?
through. I've only finished like the first chapter, but I have so much underlined already just in that one chapter. I I like the topic that she presented, but then also the way she presented it was in a way that
Hmm.
anyone could easily understand it and digest it. But then it was also interactive, like when she did the chant between each side of the room, like that really it was so simple, but it was such a good strategy to help us get to understand just like the bigger message of her keynote. And it didn't even like hit me until you said it, Rob, that neither one of the keynotes was like architecture backgrounds. I think last year one was, and then the other one wasn't, which is what I've experienced in the past. But it didn't matter because like she was so good.
what you
Yes.
going to say, Jamar?"
Yeah. So one, Ruha Benjamin is a great orator, right? Like I
Oh
think the
yeah.
way she commands the stage, and even the way she answered the questions, right? Because like obviously there was a presentation, so she's probably practiced a lot. But the questions, because there was a Q&A after her presentation, the way that she navigated some of these very deep questions
Hmm.
was just again magnificent. So I think she is probably one of the greatest speakers I've heard live. But like she basically contrasts AI, which is artificial intelligence. She was like, make sure that you remember that you have abundant imagination. So that was her other version of AI. But I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I haven't read her book yet, but I cannot wait to read it. But overall, I think it was, like I said, piggybacking off of everything that you guys have said. It was probably one of the best keynotes I've heard.
Now, the other keynote that we had with Michael's Brown's family, I thought that was interesting for a number of reasons. But before I give my thoughts, I just want to hear what you all had to say or think about it, just in terms of like the line of questioning, the over the outcome of it, if you will. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll kind of get some background really quick, just because. So basically, it was a kind of like a Q&A with Michael Brown's parents. Obviously, if you don't know, Michael Brown was a teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri in like 2014, I believe, or so. Might have been even earlier than that. But they were there to kind of talk about their foundation. They're actually trying to build a library, or a community center in his honor. And so the NOMA president was having a Q&A session. I have my thoughts. I think the questioning could have been worded in a better way, because I think sometimes the way that architects speak is kind of flowery, and sometimes that doesn't translate to like a person who doesn't speak architecture, a person who's not in the architectural world. And so I feel like because of that, the questions didn't hit, and they were maybe hard to follow, or even hard to even like answer, honestly. So I think in that respect, I think the ball was dropped, because I think there was a lot to pull apart from that conversation. For example, they were just saying that, like, when the whole situation happened, they were just asking for help, and a lot of people were coming in with everything. Like obviously, protesters were coming in, all these different organizations were coming in to fight for Mike Brown's name, but they weren't there to like just help them like process everything, because again, nobody wants to be in the center of this national stage. Nobody asked for that. And so, really, Michael Brown's father wasn't able to process until maybe, I think they said recently.
Hmm.
He was still processing his son's death. Like I said, I think it was an interesting conversation. I just think some of the questions were fumbled, and I think we left a lot of meat in the bone that I was really looking forward to hearing about.
I feel like I took all of that a little differently. Like I agree with you, Jamar. Like the line of questioning, I don't think was formatted in a way to get the answers that people I think still felt like they didn't have. Like there are a lot of people around me that were still asking questions at the end. But I think it bothered me honestly that they have been invited to this conference and like there's no way this was a last minute thing. Knowing what their goals are and that them having a black architect had been resolved already. Like it kind of bothered me that it took someone at the end saying like we're not going to let you leave here without having using us as a resource. It's like that. I feel like it should have they shouldn't have been on stage without having that connection already, especially with
Mhm.
all of these different firms. And I know like mine, for instance, we do pro bono work, so there has to be
Mhm.
others that do that. um Maybe there was no foresight with that. Yeah, so I feel like I got kind of stuck on that part. I loved how they handled all of it though. I feel like they had to do a lot of work on their end to like kind of ask the question then answer.
Mhm.
But they I it takes so much strength between the two of them to do what they do. And I think we all like felt that and witnessed that on stage, which was just powerful to kind of like be in that space. And just like hearing them as people who aren't architects or necessarily like designers in that way of like built space talk about their vision was beautiful, I think. So I think a lot of times when we're working with clients, we don't really get that opportunity to do that from such a kind of beginner level. Like I think usually like when you're working with architects, especially with the types of projects that we work on, they already have some experience. And so it was just kind of cool to hear them not necessarily having that experience and hearing their vision for what they want to see and like believing in it so much. So it was very impactful in that way.
Yeah, Whitney, I'm kind of on the same page as you, where I thought that just them describing their experience, how they've been able to pick up the pieces and how they're pushing forward in the name and honor of their son. Having, attempting to raise a young black man myself, I mean, I just can't imagine just what they are still going through and have went through. And so I really appreciated their openness and their candor in being able to share that experience and then talk about what nobody talks about, which is after the news cameras leave, after the hashtag stops, how the family and the community is still left to pick up the pieces. So for them to be able to stand in the gap for their community after being in the middle of such a tragic loss, you have to really commend just the type of people that they are. And from the architect's perspective, I can't help feeling something that I've always felt as being a void as black architects space and position in sort of culture, specifically black culture, when it comes to actions for social justice or for change, for civil rights. Historically, I think we've largely been absent from that conversation from within our community. And I think that there's a lot of factors at play. Obviously, if there's only less than 3% of you that exist within your profession, and the reality is that we are hired consultants, so we have limited ability to actually go out and make initiative because of that. But I feel like we've largely been absent from the conversation when it comes to actions for social justice and civil rights, and the list goes on. And I and it's uncomfortable, but I think that's still the case. I still think that's the case when we talk about, a lot of the actions that resulted through the pandemic and all these pushes for a larger seat at the table and all these things. For whatever reason, I think our voice and our impact within our community is still non-existent, and that's a shame because a lot of the conversations that are that result as part of the issue is it's a spatial issue. It's a design issue. It's something that we are fully capable of being able to address. Obviously, there's a lot of socioeconomic factors at play that architects don't have position on, but we have the language to be able to understand and articulate the problem and be a mediator, if you will. But I think it's still a very what this particular discussion highlighted for me is that we're still very largely absent from these conversations as a whole. And we have no impact. I won't say no. We have a nominal impact within our communities to be able to be drivers of some of these conversations. And I think that is an uncomfortable truth that I don't think we have really dealt with. But I personally think that historically we have been forced to assimilate in order to survive as professionals. I think, especially if you look through like, Harlem Renaissance, civil rights, we've been largely absent from some of those cultural movements because our we were forced to assimilate in our profession. That's why you go to some of our HBCUs. That's why I think the curriculum is largely the same from PWIs. And outside of even just the curriculum, just the way that an architect should act and should position themselves, I think we largely adopted the dominant culture's perspective. And so I think in turn, we become our language, and you've even pointed it, Jamar, just the way we communicate, we become almost a foreign entity to our culture at large, black culture at large.
So one thing I was thinking about when you guys were having this conversation is that if, let's say, when something happens, right, an unfortunate event where a black life is lost to some unforeseen circumstance, like sadly, police shooting or something like that, you always see the lawyer, right, the Ben Crumps of the world that come forward. And I've heard this here in Baltimore because, like, for example, when somebody loses their house to a fire, there's people that are literally crossing the police line or the fire tape line, or whatever that line is, and are handing them cards, right? And they're like, "Hey, we want to help you rebuild your house. Here's my card." But at the same time, again, that person hasn't helped. They haven't processed it, right? They literally are watching the house burn down, but there's somebody already in their face with a card. And I think of like the Ben Crumps, right? He gets there and he's right in front of the cameras. He's right there with the family solidarity, and he's going to fight for justice. I don't know how you guys felt when you guys were in that room, but I felt the heaviness. And it's been 14 years. What if it was in 2014? It's been 11 years or so. But again, I can't remember exactly that year he passed away. But I still felt the heaviness in that room, and I don't know. I mean, did you guys feel that heaviness? Is it not that we are not being proactive, but I think sometimes we're still processing too because we are only 3%. Like that's a lot of weight to carry in terms of trying to navigate some of these memorials and some of those things that happen in our communities because it happens a lot, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, um, that little check they wrote, we could have did better. I'm just saying it
Especially
came
charging
before the house.
$75 for the award show. I calculated it. They could have done a lot better. A lot better. Like
Mm-hmm.
why
Yeah.
or like you knew you were having this keynote, you knew you want to donate to them. All of our ticket money should have went straight to them. Or there should have been an
Mm-hmm.
option or something. Like
Yep.
again, maybe there wasn't enough foresight. But I want to go back to your comment about activism and architects with their activism. I do wonder if our activism looks different because of that simulation, but I also don't want to negate the work that is being done, especially by, like, there were some people that spoke at last year's conference, and I think the Nashville one as well, people who are doing development like you, and doing development within their communities and having those conversations in their communities. Also, the work that some architects are doing to no longer work on prisons and working with local organizations to kind of help them understand how that can work from their end. So I feel like there's a lot of work going on. It's just not taught, one, and it's not put on like Arc Daily. It's not celebrated in the spaces that weren't necessarily made for us, which you do see some of them through like the NOMA newsletter. So I do appreciate that. But I do wonder if our activism looks different because of our assimilation. I'm thinking like through the lens of like Boss NOMA, like I would consider us activists, but we're not like necessarily going into community meetings and saying like you're wrong. Although I say that, but like we do have members who are on their community councils or city
Mm-hmm.
councils, so like they're doing that work in that way. It's just not more, it's not like fighting the power constantly, and also like doing it from the other end, like teaching students what architecture is, but then also how that affects your community. So there's a group here. I'm forgetting what they call themselves, but they teach. We went and presented to them about the democracy of architecture and what that looks like. Well, we did architecture and urban design, so you couldn't really do it without one or the other, to high school students. So like teaching them like what that looks like in the context of Boston and their neighborhoods. And then just like Edward Bartholomew with his light justice group and teaching people and communities about light justice. So I feel like the work's being done, it's just not being taught, which is like the biggest issue. And that's kind of sad to hear, like at HBCUs, like the curriculum is still very similar, because I would have thought, like, they would at least learn more about architecture on the African continent, because I didn't get to learn a lot of that while in college. Yeah, I hear you, because it's like if you're feeling that way, then it has to be true to some extent. Like it's not like you're saying it and it's not true. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I think you definitely clarified that there is work going on. I mean, there is a lot of good work that's going on. I take SoCal NOMA, for example, and all the work that they're doing just to help the victims of the Altadena fire, and being able to be like, they're doing something where they're just basically giving residents readiness packets so that they know what steps they have to follow, what permitting process they have to follow, all the things that they need to do just to have their site ready to build again. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's that kind of work that is unspoken or untaught or not broadcasted that is very important and impactful. And I think that, to some extent that, I've always desired for Black architects to sort of be in the same position where you get into an accident, right? And Big Al, attorney at law, commercial comes on the radio. Like, you know who to call. Like, somebody who's a resource, who's going to be able to be the mediator for you, right? And I think that should be the same thing when you live in a particular community and you have a big developer that's coming in proposing all these changes. And how do you rally yourself as a community to be able to negotiate, to be able to even understand, like, you should be able to go to your neighborhood architect. And I think that is just the position that we haven't necessarily filled in a very impactful and transformative way. Obviously there's a lot of factors that go into play, but I just think that that's a gap that we haven't filled as Black architects in a really impactful way.
I also wonder too. Oh, sorry. Those architects don't get paid enough to pay for a commercial.
But I mean, it goes back to the point about assimilating, because the AIA code of conduct used to actually state that architects aren't allowed to advertise their services. And so that that still sort of exists in terms of the essence of how we position ourselves as practitioners. I've even made the point a long time ago. Me and Jamar was having a debate, but like, as Black architects, why aren't we advertising our work in like sources like Complex Magazine? Like,
Mm,
why are we out here trying to be on the arch dailies and architectural records? And because they're not the one that's going to appreciate our work in the same way. And so, you know
yeah. Do
that's a
you
tangent for another.
not to give Kanye a platform, but do you think to some extent that's what he was trying to do with architecture? Because I feel like you could easily take it at like face value and be like, oh, he's just being a rich person wasting money. But he did get people talking about architecture, like what he did to that house, which was just egregious. But like people were talking about it and not just the architecture community. And so it just, yeah, I feel like we need to do more partnerships and not just with like our typical like consultants and contractors and developers. I feel like we need to hone in on the art side of architecture more, because it will make people more interested in learning about it and kind of how they're experiencing it. And I think too, it makes it less it's late, so I don't have the words anymore. It makes it less exclusive, because like when you talk to people in the world about architecture, usually the people who are just like, oh yeah, I love architecture, like the older white people, and not like the people that you grew up with. So I feel like if we can put it out there more and make it like more seen as an art that's valuable, that has like, you know, the building science to it, then people will be more interested and know more about it. And like we could do a little less marketing if we're talking about it more.
Hmm.
Agreed.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
Not to change gears, but I do want to, because I know we ended kind of on like a heavier conversation, but obviously there's a lot of other good conversations that were happening in the small seminars. I mean, Whitney led one. So I'm just curious as to what were some of you guys' favorite seminars?
That Africa
Managing up.
town. Oh, see, I didn't even say my own. I was gonna say the Africa town one. So I feel like every time I go to a NOMA conference, I realize how much more I need to learn about histories in other locations. And like, it was really cool. It got me thinking about a lot of things. And I want to connect to her more. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. It's just like memorializing our history, but also doing it in a way where it can be present and have a future. I think that's really important because we have a lot of history preserved, but it's not necessarily moving into the future.
Yeah, my favorite one. So I spent a lot of time at the tech seminars and AI seminars just because that's just been really fascinating to me. But my most memorable one, uh, Nina Freeline gave a talk about her husband and the book that she wrote, Phil Freeline. And let me tell you, if my eyes could cry, they probably would have. I mean, the way that she spoke about her relationship with Phil Freeline and the way that she spoke about like so much passion that they had for one another and also for their work. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. And I really did want to go to that because I did have the opportunity to meet Phil Freeline once back when they were doing a lot of the marketing campaign for the African American History Museum. He actually came to UVA, gave us a talk, and just the kind of person that he was, he made it a point to have a luncheon with our NOMAS chapter. Had a not only just introduced himself to every member that was there, but had a personal, intimate conversation with every student that was there. And I mean, the way that she talked about her husband, like that was exactly the same person that I experienced, you know, that. So it was a touching and moving conversation that she had.
I'm not gonna lie, because one, you made it sound like you were the only person that met Phil. I also met Mr. Phil Freeline because I was also part of that chapter, so we both experienced that. But the reality is, I was there for the free pizza. I was there for the free pizza. I'm not. I actually regret because I mean, I don't think I actually talked to him, and
Right
obviously,
next to,
you never. That's cause you had some brownie nose, right?
I was
Um,
I was the president of our, you know what I'm saying? I had
and I was the VP, and I was again, I was a timid kid growing up, right? I didn't know who to talk to. I was just probably talking to myself at that point. But like, it was cool seeing. But again, you never know how long somebody's going to be here, and so I really regret not cherishing that moment a little more because I knew who he was, but I didn't know what he would become. And he is a legend in his own. But it sounds like you guys went to some very inspirational and some very deep conversations. My favorite was feng shui. All right, there was a guy talking about feng shui, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna get a book because they were talking about like how if you have things that have energy in them, so for example, a TV or books, right? They shouldn't be in your room. So if you have a TV, laptop, anything, that's taking away energy from your mind.
now
Your mind's gonna be focused on that.
now Jamar, you know your mama is churchy. You know your mama ain't gonna go for all that.
Look. He said that the bedroom is for sleeping in. All right, that's all it's there for. And so for me, there will be no more TVs in my room. Sadly, the way obviously we design apartments, I have a workstation in my room, so that's impossible because I work where I sleep. But it is what it is. It is what it is. But no, there were a lot of really good conversations that were happening. I'm not gonna lie, sadly though, because there were some long nights. Some drinks were had, and I'm not gonna. It was so much going on that I myself just I need a day off. And so Whitney, I think I left with you on Sunday or Saturday because I took the whole Saturday off. I wouldn't play basketball. Y'all gonna judge me, like the
I'm not
viewers are gonna judge me for this.
judging. I'm not judging. I don't think the conference should be that long.
No, I think it should be longer. That's the crazy thing. I think it should
No,
be longer because there's so
you
I
would
can
have
limp
caused
like
them to
Rob.
lose.
So I can end up limping like Rob. No. So Kansas City has the Men's College Basketball Hall of Fame, and it's legit. Like if you play 2K basketball on like any gaming system, it's like that. It was amazing, and it was empty because again, Kansas City is a sleepy city. So there was nobody in there except for like maybe five, maybe six dudes. And I'm in there in my blazer and I'm shooting around, shooting hoops. And then some guy comes to me, he's like, hey, because again, I'm dressed professional because I'm at the conference, but I was just walking the city and stumbled upon this place. And the guy's like, hey man, excuse me, you work here, but like what's this, what's going on? I'm like, sir, I'm here visiting just like you. Anyway, but no, there was some really good conversation that were happening. I do wish I could have spent more time, but it's jam packed. There's a lot. Every night you're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
It starts at what 9 a.m. You're going until 8, 10, 11 p.m. Especially if you're staying out after that. You're just there's a lot going on. But again, it's the community. Like I didn't feel tired with my people. I was just tired in general. But like I said, it was a great conference. But where we going next year?
Welcome to
Miami.
Miami.
Party in the city where the heat is on. Yeah, Will Smith. But yeah, going to Miami. Forgot the words. Too late. But are you guys planning on going? I know. Obviously, Miami it's in a state that has its has its conditions and all that stuff. But are you guys planning on going?
Mm-hmm.
I'll think about it. All I'm saying
I'm
is
bringing the
the
fedora.
Nurses Black Association pulled their conference out of Florida because of their political beliefs. So it's interesting that we're doing this. We'll see. I know a lot of people from the Boss Noma chapter were concerned about this year's, so they didn't go because they're like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a red state. Like, how are you supposed to operate in a red state? Granted, like their experience is limited, but that is one of the reasons why they didn't go.
Interesting. Well, with that, time to bring this podcast to a close. I do want to just leave.
Wait. I got one more thing to say. So y'all don't know this, but Rob hadn't met Whitney or Courtney until this conference.
Yeah.
Not in
No,
person.
I haven't met him in person.
and and so Whitney had to make a comment. She was like, "Oh, you're shorter than I thought you
I
would be."
said
And I was like, "Oh,
smaller.
don't worry,
I
Rob."
said smaller.
Wait,
And I
Mama,
realized
actually,
why
We
you
all know
all
the line.
well, I realized why y'all are all friends because you're
We
like the
can ride.
same
We can read between the
height.
lines.
first of all, let's get one thing clear. I am 6 inches taller than Jamar.
You're how no,
First of all,
you're
I am
what?
6 inches taller than
No,
Jamar.
you're
Jamar is
not.
pretty
now
No,
short.
you're not.
CAP. First of all,
Jamar,
I was like,
No,
"Hey,
Jamar,
Rob, it's okay though."
Jamar is 5'1".
Hey, look. First of all,
you
I
are
was like, "Hey,
not
Rob, it's okay.
6 inches.
You just got a big spirit. That's all.
No, Jamar is
You have a big presence."
5'1". I'm like 5'10".
No, you're not. I'm 5'7". I only had
I'm
on like
like,
heels this tall and I was taller than you.
listen, I'm
I almost throw numbers out. Hey,
Like,
for real. I'm like 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet. Like
no, you're not.
but you know what? I am average weight for my height. So proportionality is the only thing that really matters.
But what's your
he was like,
actual
he was
what?
like, my BMI is perfect.
What's your physical age though? Because it sounds like it's pushing 55.
But it was
But
actually really good to meet y'all in person and in the flesh. So I was appreciative of that.
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's always good to see all y'all in person because I mean, again, I used to see Whitney and Courtney every day at work.
But if you be going to New York, you don't come here. Makes
Oof.
no sense.
You don't be visiting me. I'm down the
No
street.
sense. Makes no sense.
New number, who is this? New number, who is this? Sorry.
Hey, but thank y'all for joining us. We're going to close this out. I do have one last thing to say because I know our podcast is widely out there. I want to say to the leadership at NOMA, if you are listening to this, respond to my emails because I need my certificate for my CE credits. I'm sick of this. I done called. I sent emails. I'm not a member of AIA, so they don't automatically transition over, and I need to renew in November. Thank y'all for tuning in. This is Out of Black. We'll catch y'all on the next one.
Hey everybody! Thank you for listening to this episode of Auto Black. If you have enjoyed the discussion, please hit that subscribe button or follow button, whatever you'd like. Auto Black is a discussion-based podcast that is unapologetically Black at the intersection of design and culture. We acknowledge that our experiences are just that, our experience, but your voice is worth elevating and your perspective is valid. So please join the conversation and connect with us on Instagram at autoblack_podcast or email us your thoughts, comments, and even future topics you'd like us to discuss on the stoop at autoblackpodcast@gmail.com. Auto Black out. Bye!